thank you so much for giving it a minute or two to wait. Just want to say good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on providing a licensing bootcamp. This session right now is around the security components, specifically on M365. Just to let you know, this session is recorded. That recording will be provided to you, I think, either later on today or tomorrow, or at some point this week. Throughout the session, please do feel free to ask questions. Just pop them in the chat, and Martin and myself. Actually, we have a Q&A section towards the end where we can allocate some time to go through those questions. As mentioned before, please keep yourselves on mute. If you do have anything to say, please pop it into the chat window. And finally, throughout the session, there'll be a couple of poll questions. This will be mainly towards the end. It's always good to see a bit of interaction. So please do keep a lookout for them. I think that's probably it for the housekeeping. So let's jump straight in terms of our agenda today. So, first things first, let's go through a couple of introductions. Martin and I are going to make a very awkward bit of eye contact in terms of who should go first. I guess probably because I'm speaking, I'll go first. So good afternoon, everyone. Genoa Miacho. I'm the head of solutions development here at Bytes. I typically say it's a fancy way of saying that I wear many hats across the business. My main hat, I guess, is cybersecurity pre-sales. So, work a lot with the Microsoft security components, as with a lot of other things. So I normally tinker around. I'm probably a little bit more on the technical side, whereas I know that Martin is probably a bit more on the licensing side, which I'll hand over to now to fully introduce himself. Martin?
Thank you, Gennaro. Hi, everyone. So I am Martin Simon. Some of you may have been on the webinar earlier about Windows and SQL Server licensing, but I am one of the Microsoft commercial execs here at Bytes. So an overlay to the rest of the team, kind of looking at Microsoft licensing and the products, the product terms, and the contracts that we look through. So hopefully we'll give you a bit of an overview of how we can license security items today, but also Gennaro's going to go through some of those features as well within it.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. And as Martin has said, in terms of today, probably going to be a blend of, I don't want to say very technical. We're definitely not going to go into that low-level piece. This is a licensing bootcamp, but a little bit of an overview in terms of what M365 looks like, and some of the functionality within those components. And agenda-wise, what's going to happen is I'll give a very quick overview on M365, but then I'll drill into some of the security and the Defender components within the M365 stack. I'll then hand over to Martin to talk through things like the individual product licensing, the packages that are available when it comes to E5, as well as touching on some of the tenant level services to of course be aware of. We'll then start closing out the session with a number of workshops that we can offer around Microsoft, both on the licensing and technical side, and we'll of course open up the session for QA. And then from then, we'll close out on the session and let you grab a coffee before the next session is on, because I know that there is definitely a series of events today. So without going through the agenda anymore, let's jump straight into going a little bit through M365. And I'm assuming, seeing as quite a number of people here probably have M365 to some degree, or have been on a number of these webinars before, you've no doubt probably seen this graphic pop up from time to time. This graphic here is publicly available. You can search for Aaron Dinage GitHub and find Aaron's GitHub and download all the different graphics there. Anyway, I absolutely love these graphics because it's a very good way of illustrating the different modules and suites that we have within Microsoft. Now, the one that's on screen here, this depicts M365 in its entirety. So both E3, E5, literally everything that Microsoft does on one screen. We're not going to go through every single component today. I think it would definitely be a couple of days before we can actually scratch the surface of going through every single component. But the one thing that I wanted to stress here is when we look at Microsoft, there is a lot to Microsoft. We have, elements of productivity, elements of compliance. We have things like business intelligence, unified comms, and of course, security making up a good part of that. So Microsoft is very broad. And when we look at it, there's a lot of components in here that businesses can utilize in order to hit their requirements around those areas. However, we of course want to make today's session, you know, a little bit focused. And I suppose to drill in a little bit, one place that I always start is around the Microsoft 365 E3 side. When we look at E3, and in fact, when I speak with a lot of customers and different businesses, almost everyone has M365 E3 nowadays. It seems to be almost like that base level staple of the Microsoft cloud world. And there's not really any surprise there, because when you think about it, you've got the Office 365 E3 components. So this gives you things like your Teams, your Exchange Online for your mailboxes, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, all of those productivity elements that we really want to give our users. But then it comes with some of the key security elements when it comes to securing the Microsoft platform. And, you know, the main ones to call out, I think, would definitely be things like Azure Active Directory Premium 1. This gives you entitlements to use things like MFA, single sign-on, and of course, conditional access, where we can start, you know, dictating and defining those rules of authentication. We also get things like Intune or Microsoft Endpoint Manager, as it's now known. So when it comes to device management and controlling and managing those devices that users are using to access corporate resources, we now have a means to control that and apply policies to. Anyway, the long and the short of it, when we look at M365 E3, you know, we see this a lot with our customers. You know, I would harbor a guess that a lot of you on this call probably have M365 E3. The one bit of advice that I'll definitely give is there is still a lot of functionality within here, and you might see things on this slide and on this screen where it's like, well, I haven't seen that before. Is that in my tenancy? So I'd always encourage people to take a look, understand, you know, what you have entitlements to, because there might be features in there that you're not yet utilizing. Of course, you know, if at any point you want to have a conversation around that, we can, of course, assist with that. But hopefully that gives a good summary of M365 E3. Oh, and before I forget, of course, I know that I went through the security element. We also get Windows Enterprise E3. So, you know, your enterprise step up, and this starts to give you things like security-wise, you've got things like device guard, credential guard, so being able to protect credentials on a virtualized layer. But we also get functionality around using always on or direct access. No, sorry, always on. Direct access is the old name. You know, that allows us to effectively VPN back into our network. So again, M365 E3, very encompassing. However, what we're really here to talk about today is the M365 E5, and more specifically, the M365 E5 security. Now, if I can just find the laser pointer on here, the parts that we're really interested in is this bottom row, this bottom rectangle that we see at the bottom that spans across, you know, Office 365, EM&S, and Windows and Windows E5, sorry, Windows Enterprise. I always get those ones confused. There are, I suppose, four main areas that I would always call out within the M365 E5 security stack, and that is the Defender offerings, right? So your Defender for Office 365, which is this stack here, your Defender for Cloud Apps, which is this module here, Defender for Identity, which is here, and of course, Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, which is here. Of course, on M365 E3, you do get the P1 version, which is a little bit more cut down. Anyway, to go through these one by one. Defender for Office 365, this is all around email prevention, detection, and response. So this is actually enhancing and building upon what we know as you know, Exchange Online protection, which is almost your basic anti-malware and anti-phishing type capability. Defender for Office 365 builds upon this capability by giving you things like attachment sandboxing. It allows you to rewrite URL links. It has a more advanced detection engine when it comes to detecting malicious emails. And we also get the means to be able to actually investigate emails that are marked as suspicious or caught in quarantine. So we can actually sandbox these and subject them to a number of different tests. So again, very much on the email side, and very much gives, you know, advanced detection, but also that response capability whenever there's something suspicious that's come through via emails. In terms of Defender for Cloud Apps, I'm going to leave this one, and just so you can see it on screen, I'm going to leave this one till last, and that's because of the integration points between Defender for Endpoint. And I'm going to skip on to Microsoft Defender for Identity. Now, Defender for Identity is an interesting one because this really is applicable when you're in a hybrid scenario. So this actually isn't a service that protects anything within Office 365. This is actually applicable to things like your on-prem domain controllers and Active Directory forests. With Defender for Identity, you can spin this up on a server and you can basically port mirror the authentication logs that you have on your domain controllers. And this will actually start analyzing those logs to understand, is there any suspicious activity happening with the authentication requests that I have within my LAN? So this starts detecting things like SMB enumeration or file share enumeration. It will detect things like pass the hash attacks, and all of that, all of that bad type of stuff that typically is involved with reconnaissance work, against an Active Directory. This then pipes up into Azure. It analyzes it from there, and it can start churning out a number of alerts. This very much complements what we see in Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2. We have things like the risk-based conditional access, and of course, more importantly, the Azure Identity Protection that does, some more of the smarter geolocation pieces. So this is almost replicating some of that defense to your on-prem systems. We then have Defender for Endpoint. Now, Defender for Endpoint really is about the detection and response on our actual client machines. So this gives us the next gen AV and the EDR capabilities to really protect our endpoints. Now, this doesn't just need to be Windows-based endpoints. It can be Mac. Definitely. Pretty sure there's now support for Linux. There's even mobile variants for iOS and Android. So anything endpoint related, we can actually go in and start start protecting these. So that EDR capability and of course the next gen AV capability, absolutely important. I suppose the one other part that I'll definitely call out is around the threat and vulnerability management. It gives Defender for Endpoint, and I've actually recently rolled this out in my test or home environment, I would say test environment. I've actually started to roll this out on my test environment at home. It's actually very interesting the amount of vulnerabilities I have, the amount of vulnerabilities my test servers have, and how it's able to pick this up. Now, on one side, it's great because it gives a lot of intelligence when that agent is deployed or enrolled on the device, and it can actually show me where I'm missing patches on both third-party applications and from an operating system. But also there's also a network scanner within that, so I can actually implement a networking scanner on a server and have that scan everything else to tell me, okay, are there any vulnerabilities on machines that may not necessarily be managed or deployed with Defender for Endpoints? So that threat and vulnerability management definitely wants to call out. I'm definitely interested in that, and I'm having a bit of a play and a poke around on my test instance. The last one, of course, Defender for Cloud Apps. Defender for Cloud Apps is an interesting one because this is more around visibility and control of cloud applications. So this typically connects into a number of different cloud apps, and this is really understanding what is a user doing with data once they're authenticated to that cloud application. So this really lends itself more into shadow IT and understanding, are users using applications that they shouldn't, but also putting in, the control to stop users from using those applications. And one of the methods that can be used, which again is a very interesting use case, is if you have Defender for Endpoint. So if I detect from my Defender for Cloud app that some user is using, I don't know, what's very risky, mega upload. If I detect someone using mega upload, which is very awful, that's probably a 2 out of 10 on the really good scale. What I can do is I can detect that with Defender for Cloud apps using, say, firewall logs or similar. But what I can then do is I can unsanction that application and enforce that on Defender for Endpoint. So as long as that user is using a device that's enrolled on Defender for Endpoint, they won't be able to access that application. It literally blacklists it from the client itself, and it's actually something that we're tinkering around with and are about to implement here at Bytes because it's very interesting for that use case. It's one thing to secure the endpoint, but we also want to understand what applications users could be using that could pose us risk. So hopefully that's given I would say, a very whistle-stop tour of the four main components when it comes to security. Don't get me wrong, if I had more time, I would definitely go into more detail. I can spend hours on this, but I know that this is more of a licensing session, and this is more just to put the backdrop behind, what these components are. And now I'm going to hand over to Martin in terms of talking around, some of the considerations when it comes to licensing these. So, Martin, unless I've missed anything else out and you want me to go through anything else, over to you.
Thank you very much, Denara. I appreciate that. And afternoon, everyone. So what I'm going to initially do is actually look at the books. Isn't clicking. Can you go to the next slide, please, Denara?
Yep, sure. I know that I can see that you've got control, but just let me know if you want me to go next.
Yeah, just you can click through, it'll be fine. So let me see if I can do it now. Sorry. So what we're going to initially look at is how we license those individual products that Gennaro has gone through. So those kind of there are 4 pillars, but some of them have 2 pillars each. So we're going to go through that. So again, going back to Defender for Office 365 Plan 1. This is obviously an add-on product. So that additional add-on product, it does require base licenses. So at least a base service to be actually able to consume the service through Defender for Office 365. So any user with a Microsoft 365 subscription can use it. Anyone with Office 365 subscription can add it on. Or if you just had an individual subscription, like Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. So it needs to have at least that as a minimum to be able to consume that product. And the next one, please. Thank you. Again, with Defender Plan 2, everything within Defender Plan 2, as Gennaro mentioned, does include Plan 1, but also, again, has those prerequisites requirements to be able to have that as an add-on. So that's it. Next one, Gennaro. So Defender for Identity, which again was mentioned through, can be purchased standalone to look at the identity of it. It is also included in EMS E5, so if you did have that as a standalone product, but then also included in the security suite that we're going to go through a bit later on as well. And the next one. So Defender for Cloud, again, another one that you can procure standalone and have the ability to utilize those services on maybe some third-party cloud apps, not necessarily just your Office 365, but again, also included in EMS and the security package that we're going to go through. So Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, so it can be procured standalone. So if you just had Windows Professional, for example, so had a Windows OEM on your device, you can procure Defender for Endpoint Plan 1. However, if you do have M365 E3, Plan 1 is included. So if you only had Windows Enterprise E3 as one product, it isn't included. But within the package of Microsoft 365 E3, you do have those additional services. And that was a new announcement in the last couple of months. So again, some of those services could be potentially rolled out that you didn't know you had, but may have them now, and they could be looked at moving forward. And then the last one is the Plan 2 for Defender for Endpoint. Again, can be purchased standalone. So if you have Windows Pro or as mentioned previously, I think works on Mac and potentially Linux, or you can have it if you have Windows E5 or Microsoft 365 E5 or the security package. And all of these products within that security suite, Microsoft have bundled together in an add-on called Microsoft E5 Security. So all of these products will be in it, and also obviously in the full E5 as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So how Microsoft have done it. So if we look at Microsoft 365 E3 like we did at the beginning, Initially, when they first brought out E5, it was E3 or E5, a very big difference commercially between the two. So within those times, they have the ability to, one, purchase any of the products individually, or two, they've now started packaging those products. So one of them is that security product that we have mentioned earlier, and that all of those items that we just went through from a single point of view. They then did bring a compliance package. So again, each of these could be added on to a Microsoft 365 E3, or if you have Office 365 E3 and EMS E3, you can also add on what they call Microsoft 365 E5 security or compliance. So either of those are additional add-ons, but you can do it if you don't want the whole package of E5. Obviously, within the whole package of E5, there are more services. So one of them being meetings and calling. So the ability to be able to have Teams as your soft phone, whether you use Microsoft as your telco or whether you want to use your third-party PBX, you have the ability with the calling or Teams phone standard, which is included in the full E5, to be able to actually have direct routing. I think a lot of that was mentioned in the previous licensing piece as well, again, just calling it out. And then to finish off the full E5, which again, I'm sure you are aware, is Power BI Pro. So the ability to have all these analytics, these nice, pretty dashboards, and so on. So all of that creates the full E5 package. But the ones that we're looking at and the ones that we're talking about today or have spoken about is that security side of things. So again, this is an overview, kind of more of a slide so that you can have it later. So where these things sit, but they are the three packages. If you have Microsoft 365 E3 or Office 365 E3 and EMS E3, these are the steps that you could take to get to the full E5. You do not have to go to the full E5 if you do not want to, or cost prohibitive as well, essentially. So things that we really need to call out when we get to some of these security services that are within some of these products. So if we could go to the next one, Gennaro, there is a lot of product with Microsoft 365 that are tenant level services. So from a contractual point of view, they do not need to be tenant or company wide, but these services are either turned off or turned on at tenant level, so therefore could cause a potential compliance risk. So for instance, and you can see on the screen, I'm not obviously going to read all of that out, but if you have Office 365 Advanced eDiscovery, there are ways to just license the custodian of that data. So at the bottom, and there is a link again with this deck, so that top link. So at the bottom of each of these within the document, and there's the link being highlighted, there is a way of mitigating how users are consuming that service, even though if you have one license, it could be turned on throughout the whole of the tenancy and therefore everyone consuming it. So from a compliance risk, if everyone's consuming it, you need to buy it for everyone. So you need to make sure that these specific services are taken into account when we're looking at how we're deploying them or managing them within the admin center. There is quite a long list of them, so there is no way I was going to put it in this whole deck. But again, like I said, we put the link to it, and I will send actually the link into this chat as well, so that you have it if you had any issues with the deck, for example, that you'll receive. But always something to just be aware of. Things like privileged identity management is one of them. Some of the Defender products, so Defender for Endpoint products, are also one of them. So again, if you have one within your tenancy, it is possible to turn it on for everyone and let everyone consume that service. We just need to make sure that we're doing it in the correct way, or doing it to the best of our ability of how Microsoft allows us to do it. So that kind of, I guess, brings us, well, security services and the security subscriptions there aren't loads of them within Microsoft 365, or I guess there are, but from a licensing perspective, the way we license it, there isn't that many. So that's kind of the end of that. Obviously, please shout if you have any questions. There are workshops that are available as well if you wanted to look at any of them. So again, you can see it on the screen. So securing identities. which looks into kind of the identity strategy for your business, threat protection, and then there's hybrid cloud security, and then some more data risk management within your estate as well. So you potentially may or may not want to look at some of these. Again, as Gennaro said at the beginning, there might even be some of the services that we've spoken about here that you actually already have, may not have known, or may not know how to deploy. So please, I guess, just let us know if you do have any issues or want to talk to anyone about any of these moving forward. Anything to add, Gennaro, or is there any questions from anyone?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but there were I suppose one point that I'll definitely flag up was around the tenant level services, right? And Martin, thanks so much for going through that with me. In fact, I need to actually save that link into my OneNote somewhere, because I do come across these conversations more often than not. Now, I know Martin, you definitely come across it more on the licensing side, but just to highlight for myself on more of the technical pre-sales side, there have been a majority of times where I've spoken with customers and with businesses, and what's happened is someone's bought a single M365 E5 license, and because of this, it starts to light up a lot of functionality within the tenant. Now, that single E5 license is normally because of price lock, so one license is purchased to lock the price in. Other times, you will normally find 3 or 4 E5 licenses on a tenancy because the IT team or a certain group within the business wants to test that functionality, and that's absolutely fine. But the one thing that we need to consider is we buy one of these licenses, and some of those services could be switched on by default, or it could be a global change for the whole business. At that point, you are at risk of being non-compliant on the licensing side. And I've even I definitely can't name any names, but even I've been in a couple of conversations where someone's seen that functionality in the Office 365 portal and thought, oh, you know what, that actually looks really good. We need that security wise. We want to start rolling this out and using it. And all the while, all they've got is 5 E5 licenses and about 1,000 users. And when that bill comes due, it's some people fall off their chairs thinking, okay, this is not what I expected. This is not to scare anyone or anything like that. It's more of the case of, be vigilant. There are a lot of services within 365 where it's not blatantly obvious that, if you use this, then that's an E5 piece and I've only got one E5 license. If you are, ever in doubt, then please do reach out. Bottom line of the cost. So just wanted to call that piece out, Martin, that the tenant level features, it has it has caused a bit of friction sometimes, and just be aware, just be vigilant of that. I think is the main thing. In terms of workshops, the one thing that I'll probably add, the one thing that I will add on workshops is, yes, you're seeing 4 different workshops on screen. This isn't the be all and end all of workshops. There is a lot of different engagement sessions and workshops that we run at Bytes. It really comes down to, what your requirements are. If you have a requirement that's not on this screen, but you think is almost like a workshop type engagement, please do feel free to reach out to us and speak with us. We've likely got something sitting on the shelf that we need to dust off and bring to you, or we can even, kick some ideas around and make that workshop for you. So, it's something that we can work with you with. I know that it's not on screen, but one that's coming up quite often is the Microsoft CSAT, which is too late in the day for acronyms. Microsoft Cyber Security Assessment Tool, that's the one, which is basically, it's an assessment that leverages the CIS framework. So for anyone that's familiar with the CIS Top 20 or now Top 18, thanks to version 8. But what this assessment does is it can assess businesses' security status by connecting into things like Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Office 365. I think it connects into things like Azure, AWS. So basically, it's a platform tool set that connects in and basically pulls out all the data required to assess your configuration, against the CIS top 18 and the best practices. And based off of this, it can actually give you recommendations and improvement actions based on that collected information. We ran one not too long ago, and we actually found in a customer's environment that they still had SMB version 1 kicking around on a couple of devices, which is a bit troubling to say the least. I think there was also a couple of out-of-date TLS versions kicking around, so it can actually go to that level of detail, which is very useful. But it's also, for me, the part that I find most useful on it is being able to plug into things like an Office 365 tenancy and actually see, well, what have we configured and what have we not configured? What do we need to put on the roadmap to switch on versus what can we put on the back burner? So there, again, I know that I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. Apologies, apologies, Martin. But it's more of the case of, we have a lot of workshops. There's a lot of things that we can do to assist you that, on the licensing side, we've definitely got a lot of these. Even on the technical and implementation and even assessment side, we've again got a lot here that can help.
Thank you, Gennaro. So there was a question from Mike. So thank you for that. So I guess in regards to I guess Defender for Business, there is a package of products that includes specific stuff just for Office 365, well, Microsoft 365 business plans. Annoyingly, and to my understanding, as well as probably yours, there are bits in Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 that are not included in Defender for Business. I don't have a roadmap of if they are coming or not, so it potentially may be an additional cost to add on those additional items within that. It would be good, I guess, maybe to actually have a conversation with you, Mike, about what in it is required, and we can look at the kind of the best option and most cost-effective way to get to that full package for you.
I did forget to load the Q&A slide, but if there are any other questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat.
Perfect. Obviously, if you think of any later on, please either let us know, let your account manager know. If you don't have an account manager or don't know who that is, email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Up next at 3 o'clock, I think we're at 3 o'clock. Yeah, at 3 o'clock is looking at kind of optimizing costs in cloud. So if you're around, go and enjoy that at 3 o'clock. But thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.